big news week, obviously. Big news week, and a lot of developments regarding speculation. Will Joe Biden stay in? Will he exit? The New York Times ran a piece yesterday. Biden told Ally that he is weighing whether to continue in the race. That's right. So this from the New York Times. President Biden has told a key ally that he knows he may not be able to salvage his candidacy if he cannot convince the public in the coming days that he is up for the job after a disastrous debate performance last week. The president, who this ally emphasized is still deeply in the fight for re-election, understands that his next few appearances headed into the holiday weekend must go well, particularly an interview scheduled for Friday, that will be tomorrow, with George Stephanopoulos of ABC News, and campaign stops in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. He knows if he has two more events like that, we're in a different place by the end of the weekend, said the ally, referring to Mr. Biden's halting and unfocused performance in the debate. The person who talked to the president in the past 24 hours spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss a sensitive situation. Andrew Bates, a White House spokesman, said the report was absolutely false and that the White House had not been given enough time to respond. The conversation is the first indication to become public that the president is seriously considering whether he can recover after a devastating performance on the debate stage in Atlanta on Thursday. Concerns are mounting about his viability as a candidate and whether he could serve as president for another 4 years. Several of his allies stressed on Wednesday that Mr. Biden still wanted to fight to keep control of his candidacy, even as headwinds in his party grew stronger. A top advisor to Mr. Biden, who also spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss the situation, said the president was well aware of the political challenge he faces. That person added on Wednesday that Mr. Biden was aware that the outcome of his campaign could be a different ending than the one he is fighting for, but that the president believes he is an effective leader who is mentally sharp and, quote, doesn't get how others don't accept that. Mr. Biden is still adamantly, how do you not get how others don't accept that? Mr. Biden still adamantly views his debate showing as a bad performance and not a revelatory event. This president was scheduled to have lunch on Wednesday with Vice President Kamala Harris and meet with Democratic governors at the White House in the evening. Until now, he has focused more on speaking with trusted advisors and family members who have urged him to stay in the race. But he has told at least one person that he is open to the possibility that his plans to move on from his debate performance and flip the focus back to Mr. Trump may not work. Several allies of Mr. Biden have underscored that he is still in the fight of his political life and largely sees this moment as a chance to come back from being counted out, as he has done many times throughout his half-century career. At the same time, they said he is clear-eyed about his uphill battle to convince voters, donors, and the political class that his debate performance was an anomaly. Mr. Biden's team had sought to build a firewall by persuading elected Democrats and well-known party figures not to publicly call on him to drop out, but Representative Lloyd Doggett of Texas became the first Democratic member of Congress to say on Tuesday that the president should step aside, and others have indicated privately that they may follow suit. Key party donors have been privately calling House members, senators, super PACs, the Biden campaign, and the White House to say that they think Mr. Biden should step down, according to Democrats familiar with the discussion. Okay, so that's the report from the New York Times. You see within that report, the White House denying it. No, this is absolutely untrue. They send out an email blast that evening, yesterday evening. Folks, I know the past few days have been tough. I'm sure you're getting a lot of questions. I'm sure many of you have questions as well. So let me say this as clearly and simply as I can. I'm running. So they are trying to shut down these rumors. Not only are they trying to shut down these rumors, you have Gavin Newsom. I heard 3 words from the president tonight. He's all in, and so am I. He had a meeting with Democratic governors. Joe Biden's had our back. Now it's time to have his. Gretchen Whitmer says the same thing, right? Now, look.
Wow.
If this were a false report, which it obviously is not a false report, as the White House claims, you would not have the Washington Post report essentially the same thing. Biden and aides concede he needs to quickly demonstrate his fitness for office. You had CNN run with the same headline. Of course, the New York Times didn't just make this up. Of course, it was not an absolutely false report. The fact that the White House is still lying to people about this shows the utter contempt they have, not just for their own voters, but really for the whole country, if they are to be taken seriously in their proposition that a Trump victory means the end of America as we know it. Right? I mean, it's just unbelievable how you get caught lying for over a year, really for 4 years, for 5 years, really, dating back to 2019, about Biden's state. It all blows up in your face, and you still double down. No, we have no doubts. We're running. We're all in. Now, of course, the reason they're saying they're all in is because once you admit that you're having second thoughts, you may as well throw in the towel right there. When you're running the campaign, you cannot say, yeah, we're thinking about the way forward. You ever see that? We've all seen that happen in primary races where you have 20 candidates. What's the headlines the week before they drop out? Beto O'Rourke struggles with fundraising, considering his options. That's a sign that they're about to drop out, and then they drop out. So if you're Joe Biden and the Joe Biden campaign, you are not going to say we're thinking about it until the decision is already made to drop out. So they're thinking about it, which means they have to say we're all in. You can't run a campaign 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Nobody's going to write you a check if you're like, yeah, write us a check, but we're thinking maybe we'll drop out. The only guy who does that would be Sanders, who drops out and then asks you for money after he drops out. But that's not conventional.
The day
he drops out, he asks for money. That's typically not how it's done. Typically, you have to demonstrate you're all in. So the fact that they are denying this report means absolutely nothing. The fact that the Times ran with it in the first place is a sign it's true. Washington Post picked it up. CNN picked it up. They know they have a very small window of time to convince people that they can run. And really, that window is already closed, as we're going to see in future segments this morning. And so I think at this point, you could take it to the bank that he is going to be dropping out of this race. And I would say pretty soon. I would say a couple weeks maximum. That's my guess.
It looks like it's impossible to cobble together enough coherent sentences put in the right order between now and November coming out of the mouth of Joe Biden for him not to be such a liability down ballot that they just can't do it. They just can't do it. As we'll see later, Ari Emanuel, who's no dummy, is saying there are legal issues with pulling him off the ballot. But at this point, I think anyone with any sense has given up on winning the presidency. Now they're just looking at the down ballot races. Now, if you look at the kind of propaganda they're pushing out to the libs, and you have to remember, when you see a lot of these memes that go around, they're not organic. These are DNC operatives plant these things.
Right.
Because they know their brain dead Kool-Aid drinkers are going to spread them around. So you're seeing things like, the New York Times never demanded Trump drop out. Well, you're kind of giving away the game there. The New York Times is a partisan rag that doesn't give a shit about the Republican Party winning.
Right. Exactly. Right.
They would never be motivated to do something like that. They got out ahead of this because they care about the Democrats winning. Of course, you're seeing a lot of Project 2025, which, I told you they were going to do this later in the cycle, and we were going to do a segment on it. We never got around to it. For anyone who doesn't know, this is a plan that the Heritage Foundation came up with, basically to get rid of the deep state, to get rid of Washington's class of permanent bureaucrats that thwart the will of presidents. We have discussed it a little bit, and I'm of two minds about it. On the one hand, yes, will they use this to swing all the way in the other direction, where the president is doing things that are not necessarily constitutional, and by the time the Supreme Court gets to it, because he has a willing bureaucracy, well, fuck you if you think it's unconstitutional. We did it already. Sure, yes. At the same time, it's unconstitutional to have a permanent bureaucracy that does not obey the will of the executive. Like they have a point that Trump was very thwarted in his first term by a permanent bureaucracy that has not been elected to make those kinds of decisions. But they're all talking a lot about Project 2025. That even in my Pod Save interviews before the debate, I had some people brought that up in the interviews. You know, you're seeing a lot of the I'll take the old workhorse, right? It's amazing what people can convince themselves of. Like I've talked to a couple of libs, and none of them will concede that he has Alzheimer's. Like they will not concede it, because how can you? Like you can't continue to tell people to vote for the guy once you admit that he has Alzheimer's.
Or Lewy body or something else. Parkinson's with Lewy body dementia, something. He has something. That's what Cenk Uygur. He has something. He can't remember anything. That's right. That's right. A funny freak out that he had. He must have something.
Yeah, that's the Rubicon they cannot cross. They can't admit that. And that's what's really remarkable. You know, I've challenged some libs who are, you know, oh, Trump is the devil and all. I said, well, so you must be really angry at the Democratic Party then, right? You must be furious with them. If you're this worried about Project 2025 and the fascist takeover of America, aren't you furious at the people who have been lying to you for years about Joe Biden's condition until now? You're in a position where Trump's second term is almost inevitable. No. They will not say a fucking word against the people who put them in this position. In the end, yes, karmically, they're getting what they deserve. They're going all the way back to Barack Obama when Bernie was coasting to the nomination, had won the first 3 primary states. Nobody's ever not gotten the nomination after winning the first 3 primary states. But you've never had anyone that was so unacceptable to the establishment win the first 3 primary states. That's never happened before. And they showed what they would do in the face of that. Clyburn goes like this. Obama goes like this. And they even in his speech after the Monday Night Massacre, we are creator. You know the thing. You know, right, you could see he wasn't there already. And Joe Biden, scumbag that he always was. He was never an intellectual powerhouse. He was a good political performer. You know, he could give a good dog whistling racist speech. That was, forceful and dramatic. He was always able to do that. By then, he couldn't do that anymore. That's 5 years ago. His mind was already clearly going, challenging voters to push-up contests. And, like all this was there, and now it's much more advanced. So they're getting what they deserve. It is just remarkable watching their brain-dead voters work their way through this without ever saying anything against the people who did this to them.
No,
amazing.
You talk about a peasant mentality. These are the PMC political peasants, because the big money people, as we'll see later in the show, they're upset. They're voicing that. The big money people, the people who actually control the Democratic Party, they're upset, and they're letting the Biden campaign know it. But the rank and file lib on Twitter and on Facebook, no, he should drop out, but if he doesn't, we have his back. They don't know what to do right now because they're getting mixed signals, because so much of their media is telling him to drop out, but Biden is saying no. The New York Times is telling him to drop out. I think the Boston Globe, I think a couple other big newspapers, I forget, I just read it this morning, are calling on him to drop out. So you talk about a cognitive dissonance, right? You have the media, who they always rely on, telling them Biden can't do it, he has to drop out. But then you have Biden, the guy they support no matter what he does, saying, no, I'm in. That's a tough spot for them to be in. But the people close to the president know what the stakes are. That's what this piece says. The CNN ran with it. The Washington Post ran with it. And the donors, the big money donors, as reported in that article, which I read, the super PACs, They know what's going on. The House candidates, the Senate candidates, the Democratic governors, either incumbent or challengers to GOP governors, anybody who's in this race down ballot understands what a nightmare this has turned into. And the only chance at getting out of it is to swap Biden out. That's no guarantee you'll get out of it. You probably can't, but that's your only chance. So no matter what they say, the main takeaway from this segment is they have to say they're all in until they drop out. They cannot have a moment where they're like, maybe. You're never going to get a maybe from Joe Biden. It's going to be, I'm all in, I'm all in, I'm all in, to breaking Biden to address nation. He's out. That's it. That's how that goes.
Well, the dynamic you're getting between the donor class and the libs, it's what they call on Wall Street the smart money and the dumb money. The libs are the retail investors of the electoral process of the Democratic Party. They're the dumb money. They're the dumb money. Right. They chase headlines. They're very susceptible to whatever they're told to believe, and the smart money is always out ahead of them, and that's why they clean up. And usually the retail investors, when they try to really actively trade, lose their money within a year. 80% of people who try to day trade lose all their money within a year. And that's why, man. Yeah, smart money. They got the inside information. They know what's going on. And for you guys, they're gonna shovel out this shit. Well, the New York Times never told Trump to drop out, which is such a stupid point. What are you saying? The media has been actively working against the Democrats?
No, it's
what?
Just it's pure cope. It's pure cope because they don't have clear marching orders, and these people cannot think for themselves. They can only respond to marching orders, and they don't have them now because they're getting a mixed signal. Biden's telling them one thing. The Biden sycophant media is telling them a different thing.
Please clap.